Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Boyos Discuss, the podcast where we pick a topic and then shoot the shit about it for a while. This week we're talking about episode 4 of Shenmue the Animation, which is titled Shackles for some reason. So this is going to be your spoiler warning for the show, as as well as the game, since we're going to be sort of comparing and contrasting both. So consider this your warning. So with that out of the way, I'm Matthew, and I'm joined by my co-host Ben. How's it going?
Good.
So just as a follow-up from last week about calling warehouse number 8 earlier on in the game, sort of before you're looking to get Yandazu's letter translated, I loaded up a brand new save just to sort of take a look into that and see what happens when you call them at the beginning of the game, and they just don't answer. So that was sort of disappointing, given the fact that, they sort of really lean into it being like a realistic game sort of thing where it's like anything can happen.
That is kind of weird.
Yeah, so that was sort of disappointing, but I understand why, because it would be like hella confusing if you were like just randomly dialing numbers and you're like, what the fuck?
Well, it reminds me the Paper Mario, right? Thousand Year Door. There's a part for your first playthrough, you get to a part of the chapter, there's a villain, and he's like, if you guess my name, then I'll leave you alone. And you've never met him, so you're like, I don't fucking know. But then if you play the game, you realize like it's a whole quest to learn his name, and his name is Dupless. So if you call him Dupless, like you can type out Dupless, but the letter P is missing from your keyboard, and you need to go to his castle to get the letter P to spell his name. So it's like, okay, that's funny. Yeah. So I thought it would be something like that, where it's like, oh, I know this. Oh, it doesn't work still. Fuck.
Yeah.
So
after that, we do have a bit of news this week. It's not anything like too crazy, but James Brown over on the Shenmue Dojo forum, he announced a Kickstarter for the second issue of Shenmue World, which is a unofficial fan magazine that Shenmue fans sort of write all the articles for. They have like interviews. One of them is going to be with Corey Marshall, who is the English voice actor of Ryo in the games, as well as a ton of other like Shenmue related content. So I actually missed the first issue last year because they did a Kickstarter for that, and I just sort of lost track of time and didn't really pay much attention to it. But one of the, I guess, Kickstarter tiers this time around was basically like get a copy of the first and the second issue, as well as like all the other extra little goodies that they're throwing in. And so they did basically, they announced it a few days ago, like 3 days ago, I think, as of recording this. But they had a goal of $20,000, and they've already reached it, which is just fucking awesome. Like, I love that the Shenmue community, like, anytime anything is announced, like, they're doing a documentary, which has been sort of in the works for a while now, sort of talking about the history of the franchise, as well as, like, the fandom, I guess, sort of leading into Shenmue 3, just every time we sort of come together and do that. But so there's still 26 days to go on that Kickstarter as of recording this episode. So if you're interested in checking that out, then I'll leave a link in the description for that. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the synopsis for episode 4. So we open up with a pretty ominous opening, at least compared to like the previous ones, where it's just been like, here's Shenhua doing the
getting water from a well.
Yeah, doing the prophecy again. We don't get the prophecy this time, which I am 100% okay with. Like, I think 3 episodes worth of sort of building that up, like we get it at this point. But we open with basically what's the bad ending of Shenmue 2, which is Landi. He confronts Shenhua, and he doesn't really say anything, or is in the game whenever you get the bad ending, he's like, I shall take your power for Chiyo. And then that's it. It's like that's the bad ending. But in this, he just sort of shows up with the mirror, and then Ryo wakes up, and it just turns out it was all a dream. So from there, we get the opening intro, which is the song that we all like at this point. And then Ryo goes to this travel agency, which is a way different one from either of the ones we see in the game. Because, like, there's 2. There's, like, a legitimate, like, above-the-board travel agency, and then there's, like, a super sketch one where they're like, yeah, you might get a ticket if you pay us. Maybe. But he's at this travel agency looking for a ticket to Hong Kong. The lady who's working there asks him in Chinese, like, hey, you trying to go to Hong Kong? He's like, you said Hong Kong. Yeah, sure.
That was weird in the subbed version we're watching because it like overlapped the Chinese and the English like subs on
Yeah,
top of each other.
and they did that in the last episode too with Londi at that restaurant or whatever.
Talking to
and
the guy.
Yeah. So they've done a bit of that before, but he is talking to this lady at the travel agency, and she gives him this flyer for a ticket to Hong Kong, and the cheapest one they have is 150,000 yen. So I did a bit of calculating. I'm not sure how accurate it is to sort of figure out how much that is in US dollars today. So after converting that to US dollars in 1986 and then converting that with inflation to today's money, that'd be around $1,549 to go to Hong Kong. Which is
I thought it was like I thought you were saying 15,000.
I didn't remember what it was, but the point is like that's still a lot of money to go to fucking Hong Kong for like a one-way flight, you know? Like that's a lot of money. But it's interesting in this that they're skipping over the entire boat ticket to Hong Kong sort of fiasco that happens in the game, because like in the game, like I was sort of saying, he initially goes to this one basically travel agency, and it's too expensive. They're all flights to Hong Kong. He's like, how can I get there for cheaper? And he's like, well, you can try doing a boat, but we don't sell boat tickets. You can go to this other one that's like, we don't really recommend people go there because they're not very good. But Rio goes there anyway, and he buys this ticket, and then the guy who runs that shop, whose name is Jimmy, he basically bolts from town and tries to take Rio's money. There's this whole QTE chase sequence where you chase him down, and he's like, okay, I'll get you the ticket. Like, just wait, give me some time until tomorrow and meet me at the arcade, and I'll give you your ticket there. But in the end, you meet at the arcade, and who's there? It's fucking Chai.
Chai.
And he has this is where like the first fight in the game with him happens, and you're meant to sort of lose the fight. Like, it's a lot harder than the fight at the end of the game. And so it's a sort of thing where like if you win the fight, then you rescue the arcade owner, and he's like, oh, thank you, like you went that way, go chase him. But if you lose like a few days worth of game time because Rio gets his ass fucking pummeled and he has to recuperate. But we sort of skip all over all that, which is a big chunk of content, but I do understand why they did it, because otherwise, like, I feel like if they kept that in,
be another episode.
Yeah, and like at this point it would have just been like one season for the first game if they had kept all the stuff in that they've sort of not included, which, depending on how you look at it, is a good or a bad thing. I think it's fine, since it's an adaptation.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's a trade-off. It's not that you get to have everything in your anime. It's if you put this scene in, there'd be stuff later on that would have to be taken out.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much time, so...
When, like, of the things they cut in this, and we'll sort of get into that later, I think this was, like, one of the less egregious things. Like, there's one thing that I personally really do not like that we'll get into later. But so from there, we go to the Hazuki Dojo again, and Rio shows Fukusan the flyer, and Fukusan's like, hey, I'll help you out, man. Like, I'll give you all my savings, which are in a fucking piggy bank, because Fukusan is a fucking 8-year-old kid, apparently.
I haven't seen a physical piggy bank in like 20 years. I don't know anybody who has one. I don't know where you can buy one anymore.
But Fukusan, he's just
got one.
If you're a living student, I don't know where he's making money, but you know.
For real.
But in the game, there's this really funny part where they like smash open the piggy bank and they like shake the camera because they smash it with such force. But we don't get that in the anime, which is, like, it was sort of goofy in the game when it happened, so I get it. But also, it's like that's something that fans really like.
It'd be funny.
Yeah, it would have been funny. From there, though, Rio still doesn't have enough to get the ticket to Hong Kong, even with all the money from the piggy bank. So he goes to the harbor to look for work, and he meets up with Goro. And it turns out Goro, we sort of theorized this in the last episode, he was the one watching Rio as he left warehouse number 8. He was sort of hiding in the alleyway there. And he wants to help out Rio because he thinks him working with Master Chen makes him a big shot. He's like, yeah, you're working with them. That makes you like the hot shit. Like, I gotta help you out, man. And so he'll do whatever it takes to help him out. And Goro offers to mug people on Ryo's behalf to get money. But, as we established in the previous episode, mugging is out of style. So Ryo's like, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna get a job and make the money that way. So from there, Ryo and Goro go to the harbor cafeteria and they talk to Mai. And this is sort of like, I don't know, they take certain liberties with the anime, and that Mai, she helps her, like, sister who runs, like, a lunch stand in the game. But in this, she just works at the cafeteria, like, at the harbor. So it's, like, basically the same thing, but, like, how you're sort of getting that is a little different.
Should I recognize Mai? Like, was she in the anime before this?
She was in the previous one. She was the one talking to Nozomi about the mirrors. When they were like, where would you keep a mirror?
Okay.
And there's this whole thing in the games where, like, Goro sort of mentions this in a little bit, where he's like, yeah, she was getting in with a bad crowd, but I set her straight. In the games, she's hanging out with, like, these two delinquent girls who, like, are skipping class. They're always, like, out smoking cigarettes like they're students. But you can talk to my sister when you first go to the harbor, I think, and she's sort of like, yeah, my sister's getting in with a bad crowd. Can you, like, set her straight or whatever? And there's this QTE where you beat up these two schoolgirls.
What the fuck?
And it's like, I get why they didn't include that, because that's like,
No.
it's very tonal, and it's optional. Like, in the game, you can entirely miss that.
Okay.
But they skip over that, and Goro is just like, yeah, I set her straight.
That's setting her straight. She's like, Jesus Christ, don't kick my ass. I saved your sister. What a dick.
So Goro, he's like, yeah, I set her straight. And she's like, no, you didn't, you piece of shit. And she smacks him upside the head. And it's sort of like, I don't know, they have a bit of a thing, like in the game, they get engaged. Like, I don't know if that's what they're going to do in this or not, but, it'll be sort of interesting to see what they do with that. But she, after smacking it...
She's his beard for Rio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More or less, yeah. But they're talking to her about finding a job at the harbor, and she's like, oh yeah, these people from Alpha Trading Company, they're hiring right now, so you should sort of check them out if you're looking for a job. From there, we immediately go to Alpha Trading Company, and the foreman hires Rio on the spot without any hesitation whatsoever. I don't even think he asked him a question beyond when can you start? And so it's just sort of bizarre, because, like, don't you need, like, certification to drive a forklift?
And it's, like, very, very breakneck right now. We're switching scenes, like, travel department, dojo, cafeteria, fucking boom, he's hired. It's just like bam, bam, bam. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, this is, like, the first time I felt in the series, like, the other episodes have been fast, but they never felt like...
rushed?
Yeah, whereas this is, like... Whoa.
Like, I know.
We're skipping a lot of stuff, and we're
starting to get whiplash. I was like, where are they now? What?
Yeah. So from there, he basically, the foreman introduced Rio to Mark, who's going to train him how to drive a forklift. And Mark is a lot more standoffish than he is in the game. He basically leaves after teaching Rio the basics. He's like, here's how you raise it and lower it and go forward and backwards. And that's it. Goodbye. And so from there, Rio, he tries moving some basically cargo, and he really fucks up. He, like, slams on the gas going backwards, and the guy he's sort of working with is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, there's fragile stuff in there, dude. But from there, just sort of a thing that a lot of Shenmue fans are disappointed in. I'm sort of like, I don't really mind it. There are these forklift races at the beginning of each day of work that they have you have, where you're just racing around the harbor against the other forklift workers.
Why?
I don't fucking know.
For fun?
I think part of it is, like, to teach you the layout of the harbor, because, like, you're going on a set path and sort of learning the layout of the harbor as you go each day. And sort of improving your skills driving the forklift so you can drive it more efficiently. But they don't include that, and I get why. Like, they didn't really want to focus on, like, that level of
shit that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like weird, like it's just like if they had included it, it just would have been fan service, like honestly. But from there, Rio ends the shift and he thanks Mark for his help, and Mark keeps being a dick to him. He's like, yeah, whatever. And he meets up with Goro after work, and he's continuing to be a goober. He's like, yeah, we need to throw a party once you have some money. And Mark sort of overhears this, and he's clearly, like, judging Rio. Like, he's like, this fucking kid. He's just here to make money and, you know, just have money to waste time with. But
Mark just being all judgmental with his Sandman sweater.
Yeah. One thing I do like, and they do this in the Japanese dub of the game as well, like, any of the English-speaking characters, it's clear that they speak Japanese as, like, a second language. So, like, throughout Mark's dialogue, he sort of intersperses, like, English. He's like, thanks, boss.
Yeah.
You know, they sort of do a lot of that in the games, at least in the Japanese dub. They don't really do that in the English dub, obviously, because everyone is speaking English.
Right.
But, from there, basically, Goro decides he's going to give Rio a tour of the harbor, show him all the spots to take a piss at and stuff like that, which is sort of weird. But he shows him to this message board, in quotes, on the ground, sort of by the wharf of the harbor, where they basically write down any number for a vacant warehouse, so that way they can meet up and hang out there later. And we'll sort of... Like, this isn't a thing in the games, and I'm wondering if, like, we'll maybe learn more about that in the next episode, but, like, they draw attention to it at 2 points in the episode, so I'm like, this is something new, so maybe there's more significance
I don't really
to it.
get it.
Yeah, like, we'll get to, like, the second time they show it later, but for now, it's just like, yeah, we hang out here whenever they write that on the message board. But from there, we go back to warehouse number 8, and Gui Zhang is thinking about what Rio said in the previous episode about, you know, wanting to prove that his father is who he thought he was, you know, and how he's sort of dead set on that. And he asks Master Chen why they aren't basically bodyguarding Rio anymore. And Master Chen is like, well, now that he has the Phoenix Mirror, it doesn't really matter. Like, we were really just bodyguarding him to sort of keep tabs on him and make sure he got that. And if we get ourselves involved anymore, it's going to increase tensions with the Mad Angels as well as the Chiyu Men, and so he's sort of like, we don't want to really get that involved with this. But he does sort of allude to how he's letting Yanda Zhu down, though. He's like, it is disappointing that I'm letting him down. So
I would like this better if they were like, oh, we don't want to protect Rio anymore because we were, and then this guy came to our warehouse and stole the mirror and tried to, like, you know, attack us. So fuck that. We're not protecting him anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the last episode, they were sort of like, yeah, like, that guy's probably with the Mad Angels or whatever. So it's like, you sort of have to connect the dots yourself. But I do agree that, like, they could have more explicitly stated, like, yeah, because of what happened, we sort of need to keep things
like now the Chiyu Men know that or that Rio has the Phoenix Mirror or something.
Yeah.
So we don't want to mess with that anymore.
Yeah. From there, though, we go to Nozomi. She's going to the Hazuki Dojo and talking to Fukusan. She's like, hey, where's Rio been the past few days? And Fukusan tells her that he got a job at the harbor. And Nozomi, she's like, oh, okay, you know, I'll head out now. And she's worried about Rio because he's, you know, basically dropped out of high school at this point to get a job.
Did they ever, like, address what Rio's plans are if he finishes his revenge?
No.
Because he's, like, a high school dropout with no experience.
So I don't know if it's, like, a difference in how, like, the Japanese school system works in terms of, like, semesters and when they end. But in the game, she references that, like, they're starting entry exams soon for college to basically determine whether or not you can get into a college. So I'm almost wondering if, like, it's maybe a little different from, like, Western semesters where it's like, you know, you have your fall semester and then your spring semester, then you have summer break between going to college. Like, I don't know if they get that done sooner and then you're immediately doing entrance exams for, like, college after the fall semester. Like, I don't know how everything sort of fits with that, but she's worried about him because he's dropping out. And then from there, we have another day of work, and Goro, after the shift, meets up with Rio again, and he has this can of coffee for Rio that he gives him. He's like, hey, you did a hard day's work, here you go. And I thought this was going to lead into the whole thing with the homeless guy from the game, because, like, in the game, there's this guy who's just, he lives at the harbor, and he's, you know, because it's the winter, he's like, hey, it's cold, like, you should buy me a can of coffee so I can, like, sort of keep warm with that. And in the game, you give that to him, and then he sort of teaches you moves along the way after that. But in this, we totally skip over the homeless guy.
Oh.
So I was like, I don't really understand why he gave him the cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But, you know, doesn't really matter. From there, Rio asks Goro why he's being so helpful throughout all this, and Goro tells him that his dad basically dipped after leaving to get a pack of cigarettes when he was a kid.
And he's very, like, his tone doesn't change or anything. He's like, yeah, bro, my dad left after he said he was going to get cigarettes, my guy. Hell yeah, you're the shit. And I grew up without a father.
So it's just like, it's a real cliche thing that, like, I don't think it was necessary. And that's not something that happens in the game.
It made me laugh. I don't think that's what it was trying to go for.
Yeah.
Like, it was very abrupt. He's like, hey, man, thanks for the coffee. What's up? And he goes, oh, well, I have no father.
And it's like, I sort of going off of that, like, I get why they did it, because then he's like, yeah, the reason I want to help you is because, you know, you're trying to figure out the truth about your dad, and I never had the courage to do that for my dad, basically.
See, there you go. That's all you needed.
Yeah, and so
I'd be like, well,
so like
TMI,
they
Goro.
build off of that, but it's like just the whole cliche sort of, like, I don't know, reasoning, like, yeah, he left to get a pack of cigarettes.
It comes off just kind of funny.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
like,
not good.
well, because it's such a fucking cliche. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's just lame. I don't really care for it. But you know, he's like, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to help you track down your father, or, you know, track him down and figure out whatever the truth is behind your father. In spite of that, though, when Rio's like, oh, okay, so will you help me meet with the Mad Angels? And Girl's like, no!
I know.
And he just punks the fuck out and is like, I can't do it, man. Like, I'm sorry. It's like, okay, so basically all this development doesn't matter whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know.
Just think about your no dad at home.
Yeah,
oh, you're right, Rio.
That pack of cigarettes,
I'll get
man.
you that pack of cigarettes, Goro.
But yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna help you with the Mad Angels because they're too dangerous. And Mark, he's sort of overhearing this. Like, he's sort of been listening in on Rio and his conversations with Goro up until now, and he overhears this, and he clearly is sort of reflecting on that. He's like, oh, maybe there's more to this kid than I previously thought. Like, he's not just here to make money so he can party or whatever. But
and if he is, that's none of his business. Mark. All right? How about that? Maybe you stop eavesdropping and let people live their lives. How about that? Think about that
you
one.
do what you can when you're at the harbor for entertainment, Ben. From there, though, we go, basically, let's see, we're here. Okay, yeah, so on his way back home from work, Rio sort of encounters Guizhang, and he fights with him a little bit. It's not really a fight. It's more like,
they do like the
it's pretty
same
one-sided.
commercial cut.
Yeah.
Where he runs at him with his fingers.
Yeah.
And he's like, ah! And then it does the commercial.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, again with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's another fake out with the finger thrust. I don't know.
So they tussle for a little bit, and Guizhang does the move Swallow Dive. And he's like, yeah, like, I'm prepared to teach you this move. You know, and Rio's like, well, why?
It's just
like,
a big stomp. He
It's
just
like
raises his foot up and then he
No, it's
stomps.
it's like a weird, like, there's a twist to it. Like,
Oh,
it
there's a
twists
twist.
around, and then it's a harsh kick down,
Okay.
you know, sort of thing.
Oh,
But
whatever.
I don't know Kung Fu, it might be hard, but Rio is like, well, why are you helping me now? Like, you know, Master Chen sort of dropped me like a bad habit after I got the mirror. And Guizhang is like, yeah, you know, I thought about what you said, and I never gave you an answer to your question about what I would do if, you know, my father was murdered. And he's like, that's why I'm teaching you, because I would do the same thing that you're sort of doing. And it's a cool thing. Like, it's a cool
Yeah, I like him.
character building moment. Yeah, he's a great character. I'm really disappointed that we haven't seen more of him in the sequels games, like, because they imply that he's gonna come with Rio to Hong Kong, but then shenanigans happen, and he gets his leg injured in the fight with Chai. And so he's like, oh, you can't go to Hong Kong with you.
Darn.
Gotta go on your own. But it's sort of disappointing that he didn't show up in the third game, but that's neither here nor there. But from there, we go to the MJQ Jazz Bar, and Terry's there hanging out with his goons again. And this is like a really short scene. I feel like they could have given it more, even like a few more lines of dialogue, because it's sort of just like really fast. But Terry's at the MJQ Jazz Bar, and he finds out that Rio got a job at the harbor. And he's like, yeah, I'm not happy with that kid snooping around our turf, like, we're going to take care of this. And then it's the end of the scene. I do like that they're doing more with Terry outside of, like, the Yokosuka harbor, because, like, in the game, that's all you ever see. Because, like, everything is from Rio's perspective, so you only see him when they interact in the harbor. Whereas this, we're getting, different perspectives from different characters and sort of fleshing out, like, yeah, they hang out at this bar, it's like just stuff we wouldn't have really gotten to see in the games, which I think is pretty cool. But from there, we go to later that night. Rio is walking home, and Nozomi is just fucking skulking around underneath a lamp.
She's just standing there motionless.
Yeah, underneath a lamppost.
Like a fucking gazelle. It's creepy. Your eyes are glazed over, and I wasn't ready to walk and be like, Jesus! Oh my God! It's like around a corner too. It's unnerving.
So she's there waiting for Rio to get home from work, and she's like, "Hey, can we talk?" They go over to Sakuragaoka Park, and she's basically telling him that she's worried about him, and she just wants to know what he's been sort of getting up to, and he's like, "Yeah, like everything I've been doing has been to figure out what the deal with my father was." And we never really get that explicitly in the game where he opens up that much with her. And so I think that's a good thing overall, because, like, he's way more standoffish in the game. He doesn't really seem to like her that much. Like, it's a very one-sided romance.
Is there anyone he seems to like in those games?
Not really.
Yeah,
no.
it's just kind of very blank.
Yeah. But so I don't know. I like that because, like, we've established that they've been friends for a long time now, and that they, there's something there, and so him opening up to her.
Nozomi has like a framed picture of them as kids together.
Yeah, like, it's her with like all their other friends, and we'll sort of get into that later, because there is a big change that I really sort of take issue with, and like they could have easily done it, but they decided to take it a different direction. But they're talking, and Rio is like, "Oh, what was the advice that you wanted?" In the previous episode, she had been like, "Oh, I need some advice on something," and then she's like, "Oh no!" And so Rio asks her about that in this, and he still is just like, "Hey, what did you need?" And she's like, "Don't worry about it." So from there, we go to Nozomi's house, and she's eating dinner with her grandma, and they're talking about her moving to Canada, and her grandma is basically like, "I think that's for the best for you, so that you can be with your parents, y'all shouldn't be separated." And Nozomi clearly is, like, conflicted about it. Like, she doesn't want to just leave all her friends, and we see her sort of looking at pictures of her with her friends.
This is what she needs advice on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, Rio, should I stay and we can make beautiful children, or should I be miserable in Canada without you?
Well, and it's like, that's the tragedy of it, is that no matter what, he's going to leave.
Yeah.
Like, even if she decides to stay and put her life on hold, basically, and not be with her family, he's going to leave anyways. And that's, like, a theme. I don't think we're going to get it with, because Tom, the, like, guy who runs the hot dog stand, he has a sort of similar thing, too, where he's, like, going to leave to go back to America towards the end of Shenmue 1. And, he sort of is talking with Rio, and he's like, "Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like, we're both leaving Japan, but we'll still always be friends. Like, that's not going to change just because we're leaving," and it's like, he has more of a bromance with Tom than, whereas Nozomi is like, "See ya."
Yeah.
And that's
Tell Tom I'm gonna miss him.
Yeah. And it's like, that's something that I don't think we're gonna get in the anime, just because we haven't seen Tom since the first episode, I think.
He's like, my hot dogs are messed up. Go get ramen.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Maybe it's the second episode, but we haven't seen him in a while, so I doubt we're going to again. Yeah, we see Nozomi looking at the photo of her friends. Scene ends there. And the next day, we have Ryo back at it with the forklift. He's still struggling. And after the sort of thing Mark overheard yesterday, he's like, okay, I'll help this guy out. And he teaches him, a little bit more of the specifics of doing a forklift, I guess. But from there, we have Goro and Mai going to the flower shop that Nozomi works at to buy some flowers for Iwao's grave. And that was sort of something that we alluded to earlier, where Goro's like, yeah, I want to visit your father's grave so I can pay my respects, So he's there with Mai buying flowers, and basically they talk a little bit, and essentially what happens is it's brought up that Ryo is gonna take on the Mad Angels, and Nozomi's like, Mad Angels? Like, what the fuck? And
then he goes, who the fuck are you?
Yeah. And Maya's like, oh yeah, like they've been friends for years, her and Ryo, like they know each other and all that stuff. And Nozomi's like, well, who are the Mad Angels anyways? And Goro freaks the fuck out, as is custom for him. And he's really worried about Ryo. He thinks he's gonna get the shit kicked out of him. But from there, Nozomi's grandma is like, hey, we got this delivery for flowers to Bar Yokosuka with Saijo-san, who we saw in one of the previous episodes. So she's like, okay, I'll go deliver the flowers there. So back at the harbor, we see Mark getting beaten up by members of the Mad Angels in an attempt to sort of get information about Ryo, because they know that he's started working at the harbor and they're trying to get information from anyone who works at Alpha Trading Company. But Mark is not a snitch, and he refuses to help.
He's a bro.
Yeah, he's a bro. He's fucking. He came around, but
they're like, where's Ryo? And he's like, never heard of him. And they're like, you fucking liar. And then Ryo comes around the corner and he's like, Ryo, go away. Like, oh, okay.
But Ryo shows up. He kicks their asses. It's a pretty cool fight. After they sort of leave with their tails between their legs, he asks Mark why it was that he stood up for him, and he tells Ryo that they sort of share a similar reason for being at the harbor to work. Essentially he is there because of family too, and he explains that his brother had joined the Mad Angels, and so he got a job at the harbor so that he could look for him. And they elaborate more on that in the game. So in the game, he sort of explains that what he heard was that his brother snitched on the Mad Angels, or like gave away information on the Mad Angels to either a member of a rival gang or like the authorities or something like that. And the Mad Angels, because of that, they gave concrete sneakers to either the snitch or the person they snitched to, and drowned them in the harbor.
I would say definitely both.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's like, it's this thing where he's sort of trying to figure out what happened to his brother.
Sounds
and if
like
he's
he
even
knows.
still alive. I mean, yeah, and it's like, it's a thing where he probably knows what happens, but he's still holding out hope.
If I hear through the grapevine that my brother snitched on a gang, I'm going to go, if I'd heard that, oh,
He's
no.
dead.
Oh, no.
But he's like, I don't know, he's hoping that, and like in the game, he is sort of looking out in the wharf of the harbor to see if he can see his brother, like, because eventually, like, once their fucking body decomposes, they would float
Jesus.
up. But in the game, he's looking around for him at the wharf. But so he's sort of like, yeah, that's why I stuck up for you, which I think is cool. Like, I'm glad we got that element of that sort of friendship that they have. But from there, we have Nozomi, who delivers flowers to Saijo-san at the Yokosuka bar. And she eavesdrops on this drug deal that's going down inside
idiot.
the fucking bar. And they're like, yeah, like the Mad Angels, like we
Mm-hmm.
got the drugs for the good stuff from them.
Yeah, he's like, yo, be more discreet, and then just like
Keep it on
openly
the
takes
DL.
money, like
Yeah.
very visibly. It's
Yeah.
stupid.
And so she overhears that they mention the Mad Angels, and the two drug deal people leave. And so she asks Saijo-san, like, well, who are these Mad Angels people? And Saijo-san is like, you really don't want to fucking get involved with those people. Like, they are bad news. Stay away from them. Like, just don't do it. And when
She goes, I'ma do it.
she completely ignores the advice and tails them to where the drug deals happening.
Why? She's so concerned for Rio, so I get that, but like, what is her plan?
That's a good
Tail
question.
them and
Yes. I don't know. Like, I think she just wanted to figure out where they were hanging out so she could tell Rio. And like, I get why, because then like she gets captured by one of the goons, and it's all basically a waste of time. But like I get that they wanted to give her more to do as a character, because in the game, she gets kidnapped because she's Rio's friend. Like that's it. Like that's the only reason. Like they're like, yeah, we're gonna come after your friends and loved ones now.
that'd be better.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they don't really give her agency though in it, and I do like that they have been giving her more throughout this to sort of get her involved with the story, just beyond being like.
I mean, it doesn't make that
Hello.
much of a difference, honestly, because like either way,
I mean, it's
they're
just a
put
mean,
in danger because Rio's doing this.
yeah, it's a different means to the same sort of end. But yeah, so she gets captured by the Mad Angels, and so from there we have Rio going home, and Ine-san asks him if he was out with Nozomi. And he's like, no, I was just, walking around or whatever. And she's like, yeah, Nozomi's grandmother called and told her that Nozomi never came home after she made a flower delivery. And so Rio's like, well, shit, I gotta fucking go out and investigate this now.
She's probably standing under a street light again,
Yeah,
waiting
she's
for
just
me.
chilling there. But he goes out to try and find her, and a member of the Mad Angels shows up on a motorcycle and tells him that they're holding Nozomi captive at Warehouse 17. And Rio basically, as the guy is driving off, he does this cool like jump kick to knock the guy off the motorcycle and jacks it so we can take it to get to the harbor. And this is like the massive sort of difference that I maybe take the most issue with compared to the game. Because in the game, you get the motorcycle from one of Rio's friends. Because like you get a phone call basically from Chai, who's like, yeah, we have your friend at warehouse number 17. Get here by this time or else we'll hurt her. And so Rio's like, well, shit, the buses aren't running anymore because it's like midnight when he calls. And so from there, he has to sort of go around town. He talks to like the motorcycle shop owner, and he's like, my bike is like, I'm working on it right now. Like I took it apart so you can, I know one other person who has a working bike in town, and that's your friend. Go talk to him. He'll let you borrow it. And so that sort of is like a thing where his friends are actually able to help him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, take it for whatever you need, man. Like, just, do whatever you got to do. And even if we had, because between like, we've seen the picture of them a few times, like, even if we had just like one scene establishing, like him walking through town, passing by one of his friends working on the bike, and been like, hey, what's up, man? And he's like, yeah, I'm just fixing this or whatever. Mm-hmm. That would have been enough to not have to completely change how he gets the motorcycle.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it is sort of disappointing to me because like his friends are not going to be in this. It's just sort of a thing where it's like, it feels less like Rio is a part of the town and he knows like everyone because his friends aren't really.
It also gives a lot more context, like what he's giving up, doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because like I imagine that your friends don't come back after the first game.
No.
So you're just more and more isolated the further you go into this
and there's
plot.
And they sort of even like because like I think it's after like the big fight outside of Heartbeat's bar when he beats up all the guys to find out where Charlie is. Mm-hmm. After that, you can get like an optional cutscene with the friends where they sort of show up at Rio's house and are like, hey, you know, like, we've sort of heard about what's going on, and we just want you to know that, like, whatever you need, we're here for you. And he's like, yeah, I know, like, I don't really want to get you involved, but I do appreciate it all the same. You know, and it's like, it's weird that that's an optional cutscene, but we definitely don't get that in this.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing. Like, I would have liked to have seen that, but, you know, time is of the essence, because we're going straight towards the end of you know, basically the first game at this point. Like, I think we only have one episode's worth of content, but from there we have Rio arriving at warehouse number 17, and this is also something that's sort of, you know, obviously since it's not a game, they're not going to do it one-to-one, but once you have the motorcycle, there's like a mini game where you're driving it to the harbor, and you have to do it like within a certain time limit, otherwise you fail, basically. So we skip over all that, and he arrives at warehouse number 17. There's also like some free battle stuff that happens outside of the warehouse, sort of leading into it before he talks with Terry, but he sort of just moseys on in, and you know, like, the other thing is we really don't get an idea of what the scale of the Mad Angels is, whereas I feel in the game we get a lot more of that. Like, he's fighting like 15 goons before he can talk to Terry in this part. And then throughout his time at the harbor working, he's fighting Mad Angel's goons who are trying to rough him up for like protection money, more or less. So it's like, we don't really get that for the sake of time, which I understand. But, you know, he makes a deal with Terry in exchange for Nozomi's freedom. Terry's basically like, yeah, you got to fight Guizhang, and in the game he tells him, he's like, yeah, make it so he can't walk. But in this, he's like, feed him to the fucking fishes. So it's like, you know, basically the same sort of premise, and he basically wants him to do that to prove that he's not working with the Chens. And it's another, I guess, difference in the game that after they make the deal, Terry is like, okay, I'll let you take Nozomi home now, which is like weird because that was his bargaining sort of chip to get him to fight Guizhang. Like, Rio could have just not shown up after that. And I guess, like, the only other thing was that in the game, he's like, you know, like, yeah, I'll beat up Guizhang, but, like, I have a condition of my own, and that's you take me to Landi. And he sort of talks about that in this, but he's just like, yeah, I just want to get to him. It's not like, they don't really double down on the fact that the Mad Angels and the Chiyu men are linked in this. Like, they vaguely talk about it, but in the game, there's, like, an entire sort of drug deal thing that's happening that has the Chiyu men and the Mad Angels involved that Rio investigates, but we don't get any of that in this. So from there, you know, he agrees to beat up Guizhang, and you know, we sort of have him walking with these two goons into the harbor, and they have a knife to Rio's back, so they're like, yeah, you're not gonna fucking back out on this. And Rio's like, I gotta take a piss real fast. And he is doing that so that he can take a look at where the people are hanging out, because sort of earlier in the episode, Goro was like, yeah, there's this message board, and we write down the number of the warehouses that are vacant so we can hang out there later. And so he goes to that spot, and it's fucking warehouse 17, which is where the Mad Angels are. So it's like, I don't know if they're sort of implying that, like, all the people who are doing that, sort of the delinquents who are hanging out around there, are all part of the Mad Angels, and Goro is just oblivious to that, or if something else is sort of going on. But he looks at that and he's like, well, shit, that was like my one maybe ace in the hole to sort of get help. You know, and he looks at that, and from there, we see Guizhang show up, and he fights with Rio, and we get a fucking awesome remix of the main theme from the game.
Dance club remix.
Yeah. So they're fighting, and Terry's goons sort of tell Terry what's going on, and he's like, okay, I'll check that out and watch the fight as it's happening. And at this point, after Guizhang taught Rio a whole one move, they're pretty evenly matched now.
Right.
And so they're fighting, and they end the fight by both doing the swallow dive and hitting each other. And I hate...
It goes, swallow dive!
I fucking hate that. I hate that in any anime when they say the name of the move.
Yep.
And it's like, because that's never something they do in Shenmue. Like, never. They've never done it in 3 games. So all of a sudden, for them to be like, swallow dive, I'm like, why did you do that?
And it was cringy.
At first, I thought it was a thing only in the English dub, and I was like, because I watched the English dub first on Toonami, and I was like, oh, like they're not gonna do that in the Japanese dub. But then, sure enough, they fucking did, and I was like, that's just such a cliche. Like, I hate that. They knock each other out though with that move, and they're both on the ground, sort of knocked out, and Terry is like, hell yeah, like, Yokosuka's mine now, bitches. And that's where the episode ends. So.
It has a very abrupt ending.
Yeah, and it's like, it's very clear that they want the next episode to be focused on the 70-man battle that's going to happen with the entire Mad Angels gang. But, so for the sake of time, they just wanted to get into that being like the beginning of the next episode. But it did feel rushed all the same. Like, It was just like, we don't get any of the great Terry lines when he's like, when Terry of Yokosuka speaks, he means what he says. And fine.
Classics.
Yeah, the
classics of the series.
From there, though, we get the credits scene, which is just the cool looking artwork with the cat from the game, him and Nozomi. So what did you think of the episode?
It's pretty rushed. It was like rushed and then went normal speed again, and then it was rushed again. Like, it was like in 3 chunks. Like, that first part of him getting the job to the forklift was very like bam, 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 bam. And then him in the port, having that job, and then up until Nozomi gets kidnapped, they were taking their time again and giving out, even for better or for worse, that like Goro and Nozomi both were like, here's what's going on in my life, and Ryo's like, oh, here's my responses to those things.
Yeah.
Like, it was still paced well. And then after Nozomi gets kidnapped again, it's like, oh my god, I gotta get to the harbor and take this motorcycle and fight Guizhang, and we gotta go, and it's just like very boom, boom, boom again.
Yeah.
So the middle chunk was very good, and then the other 2 was just hard to keep track of what was happening.
Yeah, and I sort of talked to you about this a bit earlier, but I think this was the first episode where I felt the pacing was like a little excessive.
Yeah, I think they could have definitely stretched this out. This from this episode's beginning to next episode's ending could have been 3 episodes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That would probably make it feel a lot less rushed. But again, like I said, when you do that, you don't know what you're missing. Like, you're going to have to take stuff out if you put more time into this.
Yeah, and I mean, with a game as long as Shenmue is, it's like, obviously there's stuff that's going to be cut out. So it's like, it's just how much can you cut out without affecting the story.
And they're in a difficult position because you don't want to cut out too much stuff because then the fans will be upset with you.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're telling an original story where you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Because, like, if I'm being honest, I don't know what the fuck the forklifts did at all. Like, that didn't need to be in the show at all.
It was fan service. Like,
absolutely.
Honestly,
but if you took that out,
people would have been pissed. Yeah.
That's a whole part of the game, and you'd be like, holy shit, they just skipped so much. But in the course of this episode, it didn't do much. But it was, like, the most enjoyable part.
Yeah.
So, it's... I do understand that it must be difficult for the creators to pace this as well as they're trying to.
Yeah, and it's interesting in the sense that, like, they could have, I think, done an entire season for the first game. Maybe not 13 episodes. I think we probably could have gotten it in, like, 8 episodes, so, like, a shorter season.
6 episodes, even. Or, well, I mean,
I think
that would just be one more.
7 or 8, It would have been, like, probably,
you could
like...
put in pretty much everything.
Yeah, you'd hit all the points that people wanted, but... I almost wonder if it was like more a thing of like they wanted to get to Shenmue 2's stuff, which is considerably more action-packed, to sort of like build up hype and like get people excited for where the story could go in a season 2, if that's something that they, sort of plan on doing in the future. But, because like if they did focus on all the stuff that like people who are fans of the game wanted to, it would be a lot of like slower stuff that maybe people would sort of not be into. But it's interesting, and like I'm okay with it overall. I'm just glad it exists, if I'm being honest, like, because in a world without that we'd be sort of dry on
and
Shenmue
then it's
content.
high quality. Like, even really mainstream anime sometimes don't get this or this good of an adaptation, or mangas like the Berserk
Yeah.
anime that was just like awful that came out recently, just with the horrible just design of the characters and sound effects. So like it's impressive that Shenmue is getting this level of attention and care.
Yeah, and that does make me happy, and I think it's a net positive overall. But like, obviously, there's stuff that people are gonna nitpick, but that's true of any adaptation, you know. So we're about a third of the way through the anime now. You know, it doesn't really separate into thirds too evenly since there's 13 episodes, but you know, we're a third of the way through. What have your thoughts been up until now, sort of like on the show overall? Like, are you excited to see where things continue to go? Or...
Yeah, definitely. My interest has been building over the episodes. Like, when the first episode ended, I was like, meh. But the second episode got me a little more interested. Third was really good. Or, I mean, I guess the second one was really good, but like, they've been consistent in quality, you know, even if they go faster or slower in this pacing. No, I'm enjoying it. Like, I am trying to watch them every week and be like, oh, and the new one came out, I gotta see it.
Yeah.
So it's keeping my interest enough to where I could see people just enjoying this even without the context of the games.
Yeah, and there have been some people like on the Shenmue subreddit, as well as like a few other, you know, sort of social media things, who are like, yeah, I'm not really, like, I've never played the games, but I'm watching the anime for the, you know, for my introduction to the franchise.
And if you just watch this anime, it seems like you're gonna know enough to talk to people who have played the games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like, I think if anything, the argument to be made for like, you know, because obviously going back to the first two games, it's hard. They're Dreamcast games. They haven't exactly aged gracefully.
Yeah.
But like, you can at least make the argument to be like, okay, if you're interested in the story, then you can check out Shenmue 3, which came out in 2019. So it's like, it still has like similar things in
This
terms
stuff
of
never
like,
hurts a franchise, really. Like, if this was done horribly, then maybe. But like, if it was, or since it's pretty good, you know, if there's going to be another Shenmue game, then I feel like this just makes even more people, even more
interested.
prospective, you know, buyers to the Shenmue franchise.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sort of with you on that. Like, I think that, you know, overall, like, first 4 episodes, I'm excited to see, because like up until now, and I sort of think we'll talk more about this next episode, but we haven't seen anything yet from after Yokosuka, so after the first game's content. Like, we've seen pictures of 2 characters from Shenmue 2, and that's Joy and Ren, and that's it, and the opening credits, but that's all we've seen. Like, we don't know what it's gonna look like, what they're gonna do. You know, it's interesting that we are going in sort of blind with that in terms of what they're gonna do for those episodes. So I'm excited to see that. So are there any other sort of final thoughts on this episode that you want to talk about before we sort of wrap things up?
Maybe this episode is called Shackles because Mark is shackled to the port like Rio in search for
His brother.
family murders.
Yeah. And Nozomi
There's my theory.
is captured, so
and put
she's
in shackles.
It's the shackles of work.
This next episode is going to be called Fruit Cup or something. We're
Fruit
going to have
Cup.
to figure out what the fuck that means.
All right, so with that, next week we're going to be doing something a little different, since we're wrapping up the first part of, presumably wrapping up.
Right.
Like, for all I know, they could pull a fucking fast one and do an entire 6th episode in Yokosuka, but I doubt
wanted
it.
the Forklift Races. We're getting an episode.
So it's like, my assumption is that next episode is going to wrap up everything in the first game, essentially. So we're going to do things a little differently. In addition to our normal recap, we're also going to do, you know, basically a sort of like, I don't know, like, we're going to compare the Japanese version of Shenmue the movie, which is like a collection of cutscenes from the first game, sort of in a movie, in air quotes. It's like an hour long. You know, so that way we can sort of, like, we're not going to do a full synopsis of that, obviously, because that just, I don't know, that at this point, if you're a fan of the franchise, you know the cutscenes of the game. So we're going to sort of contrast it and be like, you know, which do we think did a better job of explaining the story? I'm thinking that the anime. But, just to sort of give you an idea of what Shenmue the movie was, it was a promotional DVD that strung together cutscenes from the first game to get people caught up before Shenmue 2. So, yeah, we're going to be doing that since we'll be presumably wrapping things up with Yokosuka. So, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Boyos Discuss. If you enjoyed the podcast and are listening on YouTube, then we'd really appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you thought of this week's episode in the comments section below as well. Anyways, guys, until next time.
When Terry of Yokosuka speaks, he means what he says.